Hey man. Okay, if I flip on like that, will it work? Okay, that works. And then I may do something. I'm in my it's the conference room, but it's going to be turned into what we call the studio. It's really stale in here. That's all right. We'll make it work. It has the best Wi-Fi. Oh, but hold on. Did I bring earphones? Oh, did I just turn this off? Oh, it did. All right, so we don't get feedback. I just may have to hold it. Oh, wait, I have a tripod. Sorry if I'm flipping you around. Well, this tripod will help me so I don't have to hold it. Let me see if that little thing works. Oh, yeah. Let me scoot over here so I'm not so backlit by the window. Yeah. Yeah, man. So we ready? So how are things? How are things there? I mean, what's the latest and greatest? Uh huh. Yeah. Yeah.
and see. Oh, hopefully that works. There he is. So, hey, Chris, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing good. I mean, considering it's a little bit eerie out here in California. It's the drive in today with the normal traffic was certainly not normal. It was nice, but man, it was kind of eerie out there right now.
Yeah, I imagine. And especially, yes, I saw that news last night. I didn't know if you would be being able to head into the office or not today. So, are your offices staying open right now, or are you guys shut
No,
down?
no, we're actually all closed and shut down right now. I'm the only one in here. That also feels strange. We have this 11 office suite, and it's probably the cleanest place in that I have access to because we've disinfected over and over and over again. And but I wanted a quiet space because back home it's the wife and kids and mother-in-law, and so I was like, yeah, I'll just head into the office. But we don't have any other of our therapists or definitely no clients in here today, and for the unforeseeable future. So
Yeah.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
awesome.
awesome.
Well,
Well,
again, I'm
I'm
just,
just,
yeah, like I
like
was
I was
mentioning
mentioning
before.
before.
I don't.
I don't.
We'll
We'll
figure
figure
some of
some of
this
this
out
out
here. I
here. I
know we're
know we're
having.
having.
I think
I
we
think we
fixed our
fixed our
technical
technical
difficulties, but
difficulties,
we were
but we were
having a
having a
little
little
bit
bit
get
get
going.
going.
So
So
again, this
again,
is
this
all
is
new
all
for
new for
us.
us.
So
So
thanks for
thanks
your
for your
patience.
patience.
But
But
yeah,
yeah,
Chris, I
Chris,
was
I was
just,
just
yeah,
yeah
curious
curious
about
about
here in the
here in the
last
last
week,
week,
2 weeks,
2 weeks,
kind of as
kind
a
of as a
lot of
lot
us
of
have
us have
been
been
facing
facing
this
this
reality, and I
reality, and I
think
think
I
I
was,
was
talking.
talking.
You and I
You
were
and I were
talking
talking
just
just
briefly
briefly
earlier, and I
earlier,
was
and I was
talking about
talking
how
about
it's
how it's
moving
moving
from
from
true to
true to
real.
real.
How
How
this
this
idea
idea
of
of
what's been
what's been
happening
happening
now it's
now it's
starting to
starting to
settle
settle
in as a
in as a
reality and
reality,
what
and
we
what we
might be
might be
facing
facing
here for the
here for the
next
next
foreseeable
foreseeable
future.
future.
So
So
I was
I
just
was just
curious
curious
things that
things
you
that you
find that
find
you're
that you're
talking with
talking with
people
people
about,
about,
people that are
people that are
coming into
coming
your
into your
office. What
office.
do you
What do you
find
find
are
are
now
now
the
the
biggest
biggest
issues and
issues and
stuff that
stuff that
people are
people are
trying to
trying to
wrestle
wrestle
with in
with
their
in their
own
own
mental
mental
health,
health,
and then
and
just
then
some
just some
handles that
handles
you
that you
found maybe
found
have
maybe
been
have been
helpful for
helpful for
people as
people
they
as they
start
start
to
to
navigate
navigate
that.
that.
Yeah, if I can, I'm going to start personally because I think that your comment, true to real, is really important. Like, if it's true but it feels distant, it has one effect. If it's true but if it seems real, and it's hitting you or hitting me at this level, so we've moved into a new 11 office suite. We have built it out a bit of finding risk and opportunity to do that. But now that bills are kind of like, and business is drying up, at least for the time being, we're actually super fortunate that we can do telehealth or phone sessions and video sessions. But man, it really can get scary very, very quickly. And again, we're in an advantageous spot that we can still operate what we do and serve our mission and accomplish some things around here where other people can't. But yeah, it really is getting real. And with that, the closer that reality gets, the I'll say this because we'll get into it later. The more powerless we feel against the fear, the anxiety, or if we're vulnerable to things like depression, if we're vulnerable to things like fear, or even things like anger, uh, frustration, impatience, all of our vulnerabilities under stress are going to be highlighted. They're going to come to the surface. And so that's really what we're seeing over and over and over again. In addition to just that, I think the thing that I've seen the most this week and that we've processed the most this week with clients on individual levels um, is really just loss. There's the Little League is a big thing around here. Our local Little League won the Junior World Series championship. There's kids looking to, play and have the opportunity to go to that caliber. And Jonathan, I know your boys are in a similar boat, but to be looking forward to something like that and having it just wiped out, and outside of your control, and especially for the kids. Obviously, there's proms, there's weddings, there's vacations, there are countless other activities that are good and great and things that we look forward to. And when those get ripped out from under, again, beyond our control and unexpectedly, I mean, and it could be really hard and even devastating.
Yeah, absolutely. And so,
Yeah.
um, yeah, I'm just thanks again for. We're trying to work through some technical difficulties. I say some people mentioned that if you had headphones, that would be helpful. I don't know if you've got any of those. If not, we'll keep figuring it out. But no worries
I
if
do.
not.
Let's do that right now.
All right.
Let me. All right. Can you hear me okay?
I can. So
Excellent.
it's
Let me see here.
it's whether our YouTube world can or not, but that'll be the question. Oh, and I lost him. So, all right. Well, hopefully I'll get him to call back in here in a second. So, yeah, let me. Hold on one second. Yeah. Well, as much as we try. All right. How's that?
All right. Lost you for a minute. We
Yeah,
got
we
you back
did.
up. Is that right?
We did, but
Okay.
Here's hoping. So,
Yeah.
all right. Well, we're keeping figuring this out. So I'm very hopeful that everybody will be patient with us. So thanks for that. So
Yeah, I am too.
so yeah. So maybe could you speak to just kind of the general anxiety and depression that people are wrestling with, and maybe some strategies that can help with fear loops? You've been really helpful with me in that through the years, where just talking about dealing with the unknown versus fears and things that we find ourselves really fearful about and getting caught up in fear loops. And so I'm just wondering if you could help speak to just kind of, again, general anxiety and depression that lots of people are dealing with right now.
Yeah, what we oftentimes do is we construct we're constructing stories in our minds all the time. We're really telling ourselves again a particular narrative or story usually it's based on life experiences. It's based on historical information and data, and oftentimes earphones, there we go. I talk with my hands a lot, so hopefully I won't do that too many times. But with that said, it's just a matter of, another word for this commonly known as catastrophizing. And so what we do is we take a bit of information and we play that down the road. And so if like an example in my particular situation is we just moved into this office, took on a lot more overhead. And so with a lot more overhead and businesses dried up, then I won't be able to pay the rent. I won't be able to keep the lights on. The business will have to be shut down. I can default on some loans, and can't pay, the mortgage, can't do this, can't. So in about less than 30 seconds, I could end up living in a van down by the river. And I can joke about that. But internally, that story starts to feel real. And it's not that the story thinks real. That's the most powerful part of it. And that's what people oftentimes, I just need to change the way I think about it. Well, that's true. But it's also the way I feel about it, meaning that the sense of doom and gloom and terror, the sense of despair, all of those things that are
All right.
an option, that people can actually do that. But for most of us, what we'll do is we'll take that and we'll create what we call the existential fear, meaning that like the fear of not surviving or the fear of it all just really, really going badly for a really long time. That is exacerbated by circumstances that are outside of our control. I think especially here in America, we live with a lot of illusion of control. Here's something that's less than a nano that has shut down our entire economy. I mean, that's a profound power over something you can't even see. And so it tells us that, hey, we probably don't have as much control. We don't have as much much power over our world and environment than we think we do. although we're able to shelter ourselves for much of our life to pretend. And so when that shelter comes crumbling down, we kind of don't know what to do with ourselves. And that's, again, where anxiety increases, depression increases. And I don't want to minimize that either, because those struggles are real. The threats that we're facing, whether we face them before or not, they come with, some potential cost. But I also am myself trying to work on this, but helping others. Don't get stuck there. Own it, see it, realize it, but know that there's different options here. And it will take work, and it will take an intentionality, and it will probably take some help, outside help as well. But we really, really want to pay attention to the stories we're telling ourselves, the narratives we're constructing about our situation. And just know this: if it involves the future, that we're already outside of reality. And that's what's hard to see. It feels real, it thinks real, therefore we believe it's real, but it's not. The future does not exist yet. And so we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow, as Jesus makes really clear to us. The other thing is, if we are drawing upon a painful past, again, we're saying that this is the only option, that what has happened to me before will happen to me again, and there's not anything else I can do about it. And so really helping connect to the present moment, and I think two things, holding two things together, that the loss and the disappointments and the hurts are real. So are the threats, and so are the challenges. And I think it's really important that we face that reality and allow ourselves to feel it without catastrophizing it. And then we got to have this sort of dogfight. I call it the dogfight of faith, or the dogfight of belief. And that is that in the midst of this terrible situation, there are incredible opportunities, that this is something that can grow us, deepen us, lead us to new areas. And simply said, I was telling my team this on a Zoom call yesterday, all epidemics end. They all do. And so will this one. And who are the type of people we're going to be, and what is the type of organization we're going to be at the end of this? And that's and so what we do now will determine that. And I'm really kind of focused on that.
No, I think that idea that you talk about is so important, like the stories that we tell ourselves and listening to that.
Yeah.
And Steve, our teaching pastor at Crosspoint, he was talking about just a couple weeks ago that worry is a story that we tell ourselves, and that we have to pay attention to that. What are the narratives I'm replaying in my head? What's on repeat and loop in my head? And how do I try to tell different types of stories that aren't based just on, the catastrophizing, as you said. Like, how do I make this into worst case scenario all the time? So I know one of the things you write about and talk about a lot is kind of helping people break out of a feeling of victimization, where they put themselves in a spot where they're completely paralyzed, they have no control over anything, but the mindset that they can adopt can really paralyze and help people get stuck, versus more of an empowerment kind of a model. And so I'm wondering if you could speak to that, so that, because there's one thing to own it, there's one thing to recognize it and say, here's how I'm feeling, here's how I'm, these are the emotions I'm having, here's the fears that I'm having. But we also need very practical, like, okay, what can I actually do? Like, anytime we go to a therapist, anytime we go to a counselor, we're like, okay, I need you to help me, give me some handles on what do I practically do with my headspace to try to walk through this. So I'm wondering if you could speak to that some.
Yeah, absolutely. My mind goes a bunch of different directions on that, but I let me start here, is that pain is one of the most powerful experiences that we can have, and it lays sort of this template in our brain. So for instance, we can joke around about, like, those who survived the Great Depression look at all-you-can-eat buffets as, like, the greatest thing ever invented. So it's like, my grandparents always wanted to go to the country buffet. And I was like, dude, that's not very good, But regardless of how it tastes, what the pain that they went through and the fear that they went through in my situation through the Midwest Dust Bowl and through the Great Depression lays down such a thing that in our mind, and most importantly, deep in our mind, in our core experiencing, and this kind of gets into some brain science in our amygdala or limbic system, our brain tells us never, ever experience that again. And so it will do this protective layer around that, but honestly, if we don't deal with that, it will repeat itself. But let me start here. One of the things that working in the field of trauma and addiction has helped me connect with, and being in recovery myself, is that powerlessness is a real thing. Powerlessness is not something that we're trying to realize. It's something that we're trying to wake up to. So we have an environmental trauma or powerlessness. The environmental powerlessness is that, I live in Southern California. We could have, an earthquake at any point in time in the midst of all of the pandemic breaking out. We could have, in North Carolina there, you guys have just experienced a tremendous devastation through hurricanes and flooding. And so we're vulnerable to that 24/7. There are relational vulnerabilities or powerlessnesses. When we grow up in difficult homes, or we have abusive parents, or maybe we have good parents, we're still powerless against them, and we're powerless against the decisions of other people for the most part. But the most important powerlessness that I try to help people identify is made ourselves powerless, an internal sense of powerlessness. And the number one internal powerlessness is easily shame. It's that we have a way to oppress ourselves. And so you had mentioned I sent over my model that just kind of showed up on my whiteboard one day when I was working with someone, and this is a model I really, just this week I've helped 2 different organizations just walk through this time with a model, as well as countless individuals.
Yeah, I put it on the screen for you there.
John,
so yeah,
perfect. So when we find ourselves powerless against a threat, there's something that happens inside of us, and we go into a state of reactivity. And that reactivity is best defined as a fear-based obsession. We become obsessed with that thing. We look for it. So if internally I'm dealing with shame, like the most common shame message is not good enough. So I'm obsessed with not being good enough. And what's ironic is I end up perpetuating that. But along with that, when we have that fear, for instance, if a rattlesnake comes in the room today, I'm going to be obsessed with that rattlesnake. All my focus is going to go there. Along with that, the part of my brain that goes into survival mode of fight, flight, freeze activates. So I'm either going to fight it, I'm going to flight it, or I'm going to freeze. Now, all of those are an attempt to get safe. But like, for instance, in a pandemic that we're dealing with right now, fighting it, flighting it, and freezing it really is not working against, like, let's say, an economic doom and gloom. So if we stay in that for too long without safety or repair, we'll drop into a state of passivity, which is apathy, withdrawal, isolation. Or we'll jump into aggression, which is control and criticism and judgment, manipulation. All of that, again, in an attempt to either an activation of fight or flight to get safe, but it's not going to work. And so once we burn through all of those energies, we drop another level into a victim state. And I want to differentiate this. All of us, to one degree or another, not all equal, but are a victim to something that has harmed us in life. But so I want to differentiate. There's a difference between being hurt by something and adopting a victim state. The victim state is really marked by a sense of hopelessness, helplessness, just overwhelmed by fear, frustration, anger. But the best word I can come up for that is stuck. We're just kind of stuck or trapped like a cage animal. And I would love to say that it stops there. But the victim has all of that energy. The victim state has that energy, and it has to go somewhere. And I think the writer Richard Rohr says it really, really well. He says, the pain that we do not transmit, the pain that we do not transform, we will transmit. The victim turns into the persecutor. And the pain of that is that they can't see it because they feel completely justified in their victim state. It's a very, very dangerous place to be, So, and I hope when I'm explaining this, my heart is not for it to come across judgmental, but really for it to be illuminating. So when we see people fighting over toilet paper in the store, that's a real fear and a real concern, and my heart goes to them. But really, that's a victim state persecuting. We can see it in situations like that, but we can see it in all areas of our life. And all of us human beings are going to experience this on one level or another. And so it's kind of like we can't escape this dilemma, this powerlessness dilemma that we find ourselves in. And it's really painful. I often find in doing couples counseling that it is two people really fighting tooth and nail for the victim position. And so, and really the death of empathy is what I call it in that place. And those are really, really painful places to be, And again, I've never worked with a person who has caused a lot of harm to others or the world around them who doesn't have a deep, deep victim wound that just has not been seen, touched, and healed. And so, and I don't want to make it that simplistic, because it's really not. It's much more complex than that. But really, at the heart of it, you can find that behind every damage that's done out there. Yeah. So hopefully that's helpful.
Absolutely. So what then would be that shift to taking steps in that positive way to say, okay, here's the negative view of that. I mean, here's the destructive pattern that we can fall into. But then when we shift to the impact,
either takes away or drains my power. The victim, where they turn into the persecutor, is looking to become powerful. They're trying to gain power over. But for whatever reason, we can look at this through human history. The biblical narrative has this lined out really well. Like once you see it, you can't unsee it. But human beings do not do powerful or powerless very well. In fact, we're horrible at it. We do anytime we become powerful, we turn into an oppressor at some level or other. And anytime we're feeling powerless, we're feeling oppressed. And so it just creates more pain and tragedy in the world. There's a different power that we're trying to access here that is way more healthy and ultimately, obviously, redemptive. And that is empowerment, which is neither power over nor power under. It is always power with. So again, in our Christian narrative, we look at Philippians chapter 2, which I think is just profoundly absurd, and if I can say it like that. But the claim that is being made there that Jesus, who in very nature is like God, like this is a God-like person that has all of these powers, but did not consider that power something to leverage or hold on to, but instead subjected himself to becoming a man, subjected himself to being a servant, subjected himself even to death on a cross. What we see is this downward mobility in this adamant pursuit to be with. And again, one of the things of people of faith is that God is with us. That's really profound, and I think that we can take that cliche and keep it in the distant cliche. But these are the times that it's like, what is with us here? What is for me? And are we with each other? Are we with our neighbors? And we're seeing that all over the place. I loved it when I was seeing Twitter feeds and the people saying, hey, if you're in my area, direct message me, DM me, and I'll go get your groceries for you if you can't get to the grocery store. Those acts of service, those acts of love are with. And so we have to find ways to be with ourselves in positive ways. We have to find ourselves to be with other people. And these have to be real experiences too. not just something that we think, but something that we actually put into. So what's it mean to be with our spouses and our families? If we're single, what's it mean to be with the people around us, or how to reach out to those? And again, we're living in a remarkable time of technology that Crosspoint can still meet via technology, so we still have a way to be with each other. And so empowerment, there's a long explanation of like empowerment is always power with, from a positive position or a positive place. And so I think it's a really important thing to be like, am I being judgmental or harsh or critical with myself? And can I find ways to remember that there is goodness in me, or that remind myself of the things that I've made it through or overcome? Sometimes we're in such a bad place we can't access that ourselves. It's okay to reach out to a friend and just say, in that moment of courageous vulnerability, and say, hey, can you tell me something good about me? Because I'm having a real hard time finding it. And again, really just kind of accessing the resources around us, watching the right things, meaning that in the midst of all the news feeds, can we find some fun things? At my house, it's this show. I have 2 boys and they love Dude Perfect with all these trick shots, So we're just having a fun time watching Dude Perfect together. And that's just a way to be together and not to be all doom and gloom about everything. Yeah. And so, yeah.
That's great.
So I wanted to start there, but as we plug and think about it this way, it's what I'm plugged into. Am I plugged into my pain and my fear? Am I plugged into things that are negative, that drain energy? Then I know I'm plugging into something that is draining my power. I'm on the powerless side. What I want to do is I want to try to plug into things that are empowering, things that give me life. And again, all that getting out on the trail and trail running, where I've not honestly been taking good care of my body yet this year. And so I'm rediscovering what it means to really, really take care of my body and get some exercise. I'm like, man, that's empowering. This sounds trite, and I don't want it to be, because it's not. But someone putting together 1,000, puzzle piece could be really empowering. But empowered people are not reactive or defensive. And so going back to the model, empowered people are proactive, which is opportunity focused. It's not fear-based obsessed. And then they are also engaged. And so when we're proactive and engaged, we're opportunity focused, but we're also connected to the moment. We're present. That's what it means to be engaged. We're not denying what's in front of us. We're actually encountering and going into what's in front of us, and engaging with ourselves, with others. And then we'll notice that passive and aggressive are disconnecting behaviors in an attempt to get safe, but empowered people are constantly looking for points of connection. So one of the things I'm asking is, how well am I connected to myself today? How well am I connected to God today? How well am I connected to the people around me today? And where can I, if those connections are not good, where can I repair them, and where can I work on them? And then, Jonathan, here is the thing that has, I think it's not an overstatement to say that it's revolutionized my process and my life, is that as a therapist, as a marriage and family or relation-based therapist, my end has always been healthy relationships, like get people connected and connected well. But when I developed this empowerment model, I was trying to really discover what the alternative was to the victim state. Well, I knew it wasn't hero, and I can't get into all that today, but the hero is actually another form of powerlessness. It's known as the rescuer in what's called the Cartman triangle. It will always end up in the same spot. The hero will, on the powerless side, end up the victim and the persecutor. So I thought through it, and I actually looked at the model: empowered, proactive, engaged, and connected. And as a person of faith, and who's looked at this biblical narrative quite a bit, I'm like, man, that looks a lot like this thing called the Spirit. I even love how the native people call it the Great Spirit. I'm like, that's a perfect adjective there. And I was like, And then I kind of went in my mind, and like every time the Great Spirit showed up in the great story, what happened? And what I was able to see is that it made something. And then I was like, oh, wow. And I was like, then I plugged creator in, and I'm like, oh, yeah, that's it. That our way out of our victim state, our way out of this powerless, painful place is to engage not only in connection, but creativity. And that we create something that, and when we create from that place, it becomes life-giving. So, for instance, right now, medical professionals all over the world are working around the clock in acts of endless creativity to make a vaccine that keeps people safe from this pandemic. In our own lifetime, for me being in my mid-40s, in the 80s, HIV/AIDS was a death sentence. And it wiping out millions and millions and millions of people. Terrifying condition. And because of the act of empowered creativity of medical advancement and technology, it's no longer a death penalty. That's mind-blowing. But beyond that being this great out there sort of, that's for medical professionals or technology, or we are each made with the ability to make. The act of a peanut butter and jelly sandwich is an act of creativity that sustains, probably not the most healthy thing, but I do it anyways, for my boys to stay alive. And so really, really, this is a time and an opportunity to plug into some empowering, positive things in our life and start making. This is the time where ingenuity really takes leaps in the face of adversity, and that's the way it's always worked.
Yeah, man. Yeah, that's really helpful, and I think helping just, again, to have some sort of step-by-step process to walk through and to think, okay, how am I moving from this to this? And I'm moving from engagement to, I'm moving into a sense of creating, and how am I doing something that's giving life, and those kind of things. How am I proactively taking steps? I think that's really, really helpful. So I'm wondering, then, to bring that even down, you touched on this a little bit, but I'd like to come back to it to speak to some specific groups of people right now that, just some wisdom maybe that you would have to offer for people who find themselves single, in a home or an apartment or something by themselves. They find themselves as a widow. They find themselves even just as a single mom or a single dad without other adult conversation happening in their lives. Some of the elderly that maybe find themselves living alone. That it presents new, unique challenges for them as well. That it kind of, this season amplifies a lot of just normal day-to-day kinds of stuff. And so I'm wondering just some wisdom that you could give and maybe offer to people that find themselves in that situation, life stage.
Yeah. I think the first thing that comes to mind is that there's no way to move from powerless to empowered without vulnerability. And vulnerability is that thing that I think it's a big word through, at least in my world of psychology and therapy, in mental health. People, great writers and speakers like Brene Brown have really popularized it, and I think in a really great way. But really, to be vulnerable to something means that you're porous to it, that you can accept it, that you can bring it in, or it has something with you. And so that's why you see that empowerment and vulnerability actually go together. To be with something, you have to allow it to come in and be a part of you. And so, but vulnerability, there's an author named Andy Crouch who defined it this way. He called it meaningful risk. And I really found that was helpful. Is that, for instance, it was vulnerable for us to expand the business, not, regardless of what the future may hold, but that was an act of vulnerability, but it was a meaningful risk. And so I want to encourage people to take meaningful risks that maybe you've been waiting for that family member to reach out to you, and they haven't, and that's been painful, and that's been a sense of hurt and loss for you. But a meaningful risk is, can you reach out to them? And maybe you can't, because it's to be rejected one more time wouldn't work. But to reach out to your neighbors, to reach out to the people around you, to use this technology to connect. And so engaging in meaningful risk is really important. And it could be small things. It could be, again, bust out your favorite childhood movie if you have access to it. Look for those points of connection anywhere that you can. And again, I just think about, how amazing, we can kind of take things like crocheting for granted. We can take things like jewelry making for granted. No, this is the time. You may not feel like, hey, it's to some great end, but no, engage in making something. If you're good, if you can, and you're able to do that. But again, this is the time to reach out. And the other thing is that I want to encourage people that you matter, and that this way of service, this way of reaching out to other people and seeing where you can be of helpfulness and usefulness is also a huge avenue to connectivity with others as well. So sometimes just we got to get out of ourselves, and again, powerlessness and the pain of powerlessness creates ridiculous self-obsession. And so I know that all too well personally. So oftentimes I just find myself getting out of myself. But the National Association of Mental Illness, NAMI, they have support groups out there online. I really, really, really want to send a kind of a shout out to those in recovery from addiction, especially if you're in early recovery. Get to the online resources, make the phone call, stay in the literature. I mean, this is an incredibly vulnerable time to engage in the addiction. If you're in the middle of addiction and I'm like, hey, you got nothing but time on your hands right now. If you have it in you to reach out, make the phone calls. Maybe you know someone in your life that's in recovery and ask them what you're doing. The meaningful risk oftentimes is telling people, I'm in a really bad, desperate situation here and I need help.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I would just really, really, I oftentimes use this line from, it's kind of a cheesy movie, but We Bought a Zoo. And so, Matt Damon is this character. He loses his wife. He's, has his kids, and really heartbreaking story, but they end up buying a zoo. But part of the story is that his son is starting to get into that age where he's liking girls and being, finding he has a crush on them, but not knowing what to do with himself and that insecurity. And Matt Damon's character tells a story about how he met his wife, and it took 20 seconds of insane courage. And so I love that idea of 20 seconds of insane courage. Do we have, if we're in a bad and desperate situation, do we have that 20 seconds of insane courage to reach out and to do something there? And just let's see what happens there. And then, Jonathan, again, I know that this can sound trite and this can sound sort of like the Sunday school answer. It's not meant to be, but people of faith, dig in. I mean, dig in. This is where the metal of our faith is really formed in these times, and this could be a great opportunity to strengthen ourselves in that which we hold on to most importantly. So I could go on and on about just.
No, I think that's great. Just even for people that organization NAMI, so it's NAMI. So you can just Google that NAMI. And there's lots of really great resources on there, lots of places to connect on there. And so that would definitely be a place to go to help you connect with some things. So, Chris, I'm also wondering, I'm encountering, just having a lot of conversations with people who find themselves in a situation now, too, where they're in a home with people 24/7 that they're not used to being in that home 24/7.
Yes.
And whether that's with a partner or a spouse or with teenagers or relationships that are just difficult, and now all of a sudden, like, you're stuck. There is no escape for several hours in a day. There is no, hey, and we've got to figure out how do we do this dance together? And even for some people, where it can start off as, oh, this feels like a little break, and then you're just reality and normacy, but then you're like, okay, here's 2 weeks, and now there's 3 weeks, and now there's a month. What are some maybe handles and wisdom that you could offer those people and their relationships and how they navigate a new season when they're trying to navigate being around people 24/7 for the first time?
Yeah, this is near and dear to my heart, because this is, the heart of what I do on a daily basis, and helping people find better connections and healthier relationships with each other. And I don't even have a solution for this, but I've just been, what's really, really wrenching my heart right now is like those people who are trapped in abusive homes and domestic violence right now. And that's it just wrenches my heart to think, to be trapped in that situation, and for the abuser to now have an excuse of, hey, you can't go anywhere. I really hurt for those in that situation. That powerlessness is, again, very, very real. But with that, I would say this is a good time to practice boundaries. And again, I could go into a whole other thing about boundaries, but boundaries exist to protect that which is valuable. And it's really important for us to be able to connect to our own value, to know our worth, because then we'll be able to set more healthy and firm boundaries. But a simple boundary could be like just a timeout. And Mom, it's okay to go to your bedroom and shut the door and let kids figure, if they're able to, and small babies and infants are different than that. But, but if they're nap. I mean, take the timeouts, take the times away, get out and walk around the block. We can keep all the social distancing through those processes. But really, really finding a way to take a break from other people is really, really important. I would say, unless you're under the guidance of a counselor or therapist, don't get into try to working on a really, really hard, difficult things on your own during this time that can spiral into greater conflicts and greater pain points. It's probably not helpful. But oftentimes you may look to do things like, hey, catch up on some movies, read some books. And going back to the creativity, do you have a project that you can do together? Maybe you're like me and that garage has been neglected for way too long, and it's not fun, but man, let's tackle this thing together. And then again, I think we're creating new memories with our, whether it be our roommates, our partners, our spouses, our kids. There's just a lot of opportunity here to really just create memories. I know that we're finding a lot of enjoyment in games. There's a children's illustrator and author named Mo Willems who every day is doing an illustration online where he's showing kids how to draw one of his characters. And so my wife has been get my boys doing that. It's creativity here, She set up stations yesterday at home where they have to go to stations and they have to do 5 push-ups here. And of course, my 4-year-old is doing butt lifts instead of push-ups during that time. But just fun things to do. And so, again, I really think helping ourselves and each other access our creativity and try to have those points of connection, during this time. But again, I think it's really important that we're able to take time out and that our kids are able to take time out during this time. So
yeah, it's good to because you can almost feel guilty for taking a time out. Like, it's one of those things where you're feeling like, wait a second, like, if I'm supposed to be around these people, I should just take advantage of every single moment, and I should schedule every single moment, and I should do all these things, and feeling bad of going, no, you know what, this is good for us to find ways to create space. Everybody can go to their own room for a little bit. You can go walk around if you need to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and then also do things that maybe you haven't had time to catch up on, and walk. I mean, our family took a walk last night rather than just one of us walking the dog. Like, all 4 of us walked the dog around the park.
Yeah.
And it was just good. Like, okay, we didn't have these meaningful conversations. There was no deep connection. It was just, we need to get out of the house. We're going to go all walk around the block and just, yeah, and just check that box and say, you know what, that's a helpful thing. So,
Yeah.
So a couple more things I have for you before I know we need to let you go. But I know one of the things that you've always been really helpful for me in is just the study of just brain science in general and understanding the brain, how the brain works. And so I'm wondering, in the spirit of the golden rule, when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself. And one of the things we try to talk a lot about around here is that part of that is learning to love yourself. Like, you have to figure out how to love yourself well before you can love your neighbor well. And so I'm wondering maybe if you could speak to ways that we in this season love others and ways that we love ourselves, how that actually has a positive effect on our mental state, on our brain chemistry, and a little bit of that just science behind it, so that we know, oh, this just isn't feel good. This isn't just faith talk that's speaking, but this is actual, brain science and chemistry. By doing these kinds of things is actually improving our mental state.
Yeah. I don't have my whiteboard in this room, but that would be helpful to go to that. But with that said, let's just think of the brain in maybe three different levels. You have your basement, you have your main floor, and then you have your upstairs. And so the upstairs would be the prefrontal cortex. I call it our God brain. I mean, other mammals have a prefrontal cortex, but they don't have capacity to blow up the world. So there's something different about the human being's prefrontal cortex, and I think it's part of how that one part in which we bear the image of God. Most other animals have the lower two parts of the brain. All of them have the lowest part, which is, again, the survival, sort of the limbic. So when we're in that limbic, fear-based, angry, fight, flight, freeze, or totally passive, checked out, paralyzed in life, we can't function out of a part of our brain that best connects and develops life. So, that second level gets us a little bit closer, a little bit further along there, but we can get stuck there too. Like, there's, in our left parietal is the part where we figure things out. And so a lot of people, I'm prone to this, we're trying to figure ourselves or figure the world out. Once I figure it all out, then I will do something, or then I'll take action. But again, it usually keeps us in a state of paralysis, overthinking, or paralysis by analysis. The right side of our brain is more creative and emotional, but that also is like, it can kind of get us in a fantasy land, escape us, out here where we're not, again, where we have fantastical ideas that may feel good, but what really don't have an impact on our daily lives. So the prefrontal cortex up here, our high brain, our God brain, our upstairs brain, is the brain that constructs meaning, purpose, significance. It's the brain that can understand and connect to that greater sense of love, the greater sense of security and belonging, not only in safety, but again, ultimately in creativity. And so loving our neighbors and loving ourselves is one of the things it does is that through the acts of love, if we just think of the two attributes that starts off with in 1 Corinthians 13 of patience and kindness. If I can be patient with myself and kind with myself, what that does is it cools or it relaxes that lower part of the brain, where we can take a deep breath, where we're not in these obsessive or fear-based loops. The perfect love drives out fear is a biblical statement, but it's really scientific. It's super scientific, actually. Like, that's neurology 101 right there. And so entering into empathy and understanding and engagement, and through kindness, through compassion. When it comes to ourselves, I love the phrase compassionate curiosity. So I woke up with a lot of fear, financial fear this morning, looking at the business. And I'm just like, okay, that's real. And I tend to beat myself up over feeling foolish over decisions. But instead, I want to let's just get compassionately curious about this, And that kind of gives us permission to explore without shutting things down or getting hijacked into that fight, flight, freeze mode. But then having meaningful conversations. I want to talk to some people about this, and reach out to my friends and my network and get this outside of myself, and those acts of love. And then, by the way, if I check in with my neighbor and see how they're doing, and knowing that their restaurant, their downtown restaurant, is shut down right now, and how can I help him, and can I get the word out for him, and can I do a thing like that? Automatically, I'm outside of myself. I'm no longer self-obsessed with my fear, but I'm engaging with him and being helpful. Now, again, I'm cooling or relaxing or, getting out of that lower part of the brain. So the smartest thing that we could do is to give and receive love without question. And again, that is as deeply neurological as it ever is theological.
Mm. Yeah, that's a good it's a good reminder that Jesus actually did know what he was talking about when he was like, this sums up everything, like everything.
Yeah.
This sums it all up. If you'll do these two things, it will actually lead to life. And so, really grateful for that. So I want to give an opportunity too, if anyone has any questions. We've got about 7 or 8 minutes. If you have any questions, you can put those in the comments and we can ask Chris and talk about that. And as that happens, though, Chris, I'm just wondering if you have any other wisdom, any other pieces of advice that you'd like to share, and say, hey, if I had I'm sitting on the couch across from somebody and I've got 2 or 3 minutes that I can share with you something. Here's what I want to make sure to leave people with.
I would say this: we passively go about our days. Oftentimes, I know I do, and so hopefully we can get woken up here. I guess the kids call it woke these days. We want to get woke. One of the best ways and most practical ways to do that is that no one else most likely is determining your schedule right now. You have to do it. So create your schedule. We're creating our time. Time is a function of creativity, as crazy as that may sound. And I don't want to get too philosophical there, but I follow a guy named John Acuff on social media, and one of the things that he says, he's worked for home for years, but he doesn't stay in his PJs. He still gets up, he shaves, he showers, he gets in, some decent clothes. And I was like, I think that's brilliant. It's those really simple acts, but sit down and schedule some things out throughout your day, so you're not just finding yourself just falling into the abyss of passivity, because it really is a dangerous place to be. And you can actually schedule in, hey, from 1 to 2:30, it's nothing time, like no agenda. Totally cool. Just have it on the agenda. So I would just really encourage people on that practicality that way.
Yeah. Well, man, Chris, I can't thank you enough that you'd come in and give us an hour of your time. And I know it's helpful to a lot of people. It's been helpful to me personally. I know, you would just come in and give us an hour of your time to spend and to share with us. And so really grateful for that. And maybe we can do it again sometime soon, and we'll tackle some more stuff.
Absolutely, man. And Jonathan, obviously, it's a huge honor. I love you guys out there. I love what you're doing. I believe in what you're doing. And I thank you for just making this platform available. And I want to say, I watched your and Steve's video the other day. You guys said something I think was really profound. I think Steve said, he doesn't like the word social distancing. And I'm with him. I actually, if I use the word I hate that term, social distancing. We already do too much of that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Physical distancing is a much more accurate.
He was actually quoting one of our staff members, Janet Girton, who just, it was really profound. And Janet.
Shout out to Janet.
I know.
You're brilliant.
She's one of those that when she does speak, it's always profound. And so we're super grateful for her. So we're trying to adopt that mentality. So, all right, brother. Well, thank you so very much. And thank you guys for hanging in. Hope that's been helpful. And if you need to watch through it again and get some of these steps and practicalities, go back through it, take that empowerment model and walk yourself through some of those mental steps right now. And hopefully we'll continue to link arms and figure out how to love one another and love each other better. So thanks, guys. Love you.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys. Love you much.